Morning, everyone. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Jose. Morning.
Okay.
Maybe
I
no one
think
is speaking in the room.
I think you're here. Well, we are beginning this session about fish markets. I think, as we have commented during the conference, fair participation of small-scale fisheries. Sorry.
Speak
Louder. To improve the participation of small-scale fisheries in fish market is a key element for the survival of the small-scale fisheries, for the renewal of the people. We need to develop market strategies that improve the selling of the catches of these fisheries, because if not, they are always be in trouble. So that implies adapting to the market changes, because the fish market has changed a lot in the last decades, and it has not been so usual to develop adaptation process that cope the offer of the small scale fisheries with the new market demands, and this is something that need to be improved. For that reason, we are trying to show in this session some of the innovative market strategies that are being developed in different areas of Europe. So, without further ado, Cristina will begin with the first presentation. Cristina Pita, University of Aveiro.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, I think, still. I will probably go a bit too fast, because I just realized I probably have more slides than I should have. So I'll be talking a bit about innovative market initiatives for small-scale fisheries in Europe. Just giving a bit of an introduction. It's kind of well known for anyone that's been paying a bit of attention to the seafood supply chains that they're very complex. Fish and fish-related products are amongst the most highly traded commodities globally. And if anyone wasn't aware of that, they were made aware with the COVID-19 pandemic, how much actually as food is a global commodity, and also seafood, which came as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people in the sector. Trade in fisheries products is very complex. It's a very dynamic process as well, and is highly segmented and diversified. So that figure that I have on top is a very good example of trade in seafood systems. It's quite confusing. It's very difficult to map supply chains because it's very complex. There's many actors on it. You lose track of it, being that traceability becomes quite an important issue, and I'll talk about it a bit later. And this complex in this dynamics, a bit of a reflection of a better informed consumer. You have consumers that want tastes and preferences for seafood have changed a bit, which also increases a bit of global trade. And we want a variety of seafoods from different parts of the world, especially maybe in the most important markets in the world for seafood, which is the US, the EU, Japan. So we want different species and what's a bit more variety and maybe more elaborate products as well. I have the last thing. Definitely the biggest share of traded species in the world are large quantities of small pelagics, no doubt about it. But there is an increase of an important share of high value species entering global trade, and like lobsters traditionally, even octopus. I work with octopus a lot, and it's really a global commodity, octopus at the moment, and quite exploited everywhere, and going a lot to the EU market, to the US market. Japan was already important, and has always been important in octopus. So I wanted just a very quick slide, put it a bit in context. I think everyone has seen it already that are here in the conference. Why small-scale fish is important in terms of aquatic food systems. A very recent report, Illuminating Hidden Harvest, has put these kind of numbers out. Small-scale fisheries account for 40% of the total global fisheries catch. So it contributes to food security and at the local level, provides local markets with fresh fish, and improves nutrition. It's also increasingly entering global markets. And the IHH report noticed that 26% of the marine catch on the places where they actually looked into the small-scale fisheries, 26% of those marine catches, not aquatic, so just marine, enters global markets. So that's quite an important share, because there's this tendency about thinking about small-scale fishes as just a local product. It is not a local product. It actually moves quite a lot, and that's quite important. And it's very important, small-scale fishes, for livelihoods all over the world, with around 492 million people depending on small-scale fishes for their livelihood. It's 10% of the world population. It's a gigantic number. And just 60 million people depend directly, so they're fishers, and 90% of those fishers are small-scale fishers. So small-scale fisheries becomes this very important activity in terms of fisheries. And last but not least, the importance of women. Women are a really important part of small-scale fisheries. 4 in every 10 people employed in small-scale fisheries are women. And we've been talking about gender and the importance of women in all the previous sessions and just in the keynote session. So that's in small-scale fisheries, this presence is huge, and especially related to the value chain, where women do most of the work. Then I'm going to bring it to Europe. That's because I was told this is when we needed to talk about fisheries in Europe in this conference. Numbers, always quite an important thing to show. You always have to put things into this kind of perspective of numbers to show its social economic importance. So 80% of the EU fleet is small scale, 54% of employment. But small scale fisheries is not just numbers, it goes way beyond numbers, and it has and things that are much more difficult to measure. It's really important in terms of employment, including women in coastal communities that are not just fishermen, so all these other activities that go around fisheries. It's important in terms of food security and sovereignty, an issue for which the EU is very worried about right now with the war in Ukraine. Suddenly, we were very much made aware of the importance of food security. It's really important in terms of cultural heritage and tradition all over Europe, and it provides markets with this diversity of local products, of high quality local products that the market doesn't always appreciate. I added this slide. I think this is a time a bit. I've been saying it's a time of small scale fisheries for a long time, but there's a certain momentum right now that we can actually for showing the importance of small scale fisheries, both in Europe and beyond. There are calls for address current challenges. The World Trade Organization, WTO, just took decisions regarding fisheries subsidies, which might have an impact, because nothing is set in stone yet, on IUU fishing. There's also all these debates around climate change that are increasingly taking into consideration food systems, mostly agri-food systems, it's true, but there's a push, at least from the scientific community and NGOs working in seafood, that we bring seafood or aquatic foods into the debate as well, which is aquatic foods are very neglected in these debates. There's also the UN SDG 14B, which calls for small-scale fishes access to resources and markets. The UN does have indicators I always found this interesting, and I did an entire work on this. The UN does have indicators to measure access to resources, and access to markets is completely neglected. There's no indicator to measure any of that. I know it's difficult to measure that, but it's there. So if you put it there, you should have an indicator to measure it. In Europe, we have the fisheries local action groups. We do have some sort of financing for innovative actions on aquatic seafood systems for small-scale fisheries. Although we also have done some work on this, and most of the money that FLAG spend doesn't tend to be spent on fisheries so much. There's a lot of money spent in tourism that doesn't have to be reflected in fisheries, but it's there, and there's a possibility of spending it on fisheries. There's a lot of concerns about food security because of COVID, energy, transport crisis at the moment. The UN has, for the first time, at the summit on food systems. That was last year in 2021, UN Food Systems Summit. seafood or aquatic foods were very forgotten in the UN Food System Summit, but that raised a bit of issues from some articles on the news. Why are we forgetting aquatic foods when we're talking about food? So, and then we're going to have again a food summit this year, and that is a good opportunity to bring attention to aquatic foods and maybe to food from small-scale fisheries as well. There's this year, while we're here, it's IAFA, the International Year of Small-Scale Fisheries, International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. So this is a good time that the eyes are a bit put on small-scale fisheries to raise the profile and to make it more important and to not be forgotten beyond 2022. And also, like Brian mentioned on the first session, the FAO just launched their strategy called UN Blue Transformation. But for me, a sad name, because we have blue growth, blue this, blue that. No one would automatically think that blue transformation is related to food to start with. But it is. It's a strategy to improve food systems. Confusing how small-scale fisheries fits in there, but it's a strategy for improved seafood systems. And I think we're at the time that we could actually push for maybe the presence of small-scale fisheries to be more there in the document. But all this that's happening does make the attention be on small-scale fisheries. And small-scale fisheries, Jose has already showed that we published a book. We try to see the challenge they face. They face many challenges. We've talked about it a lot on previous sessions, so I'll go through it very quickly. There's an initial lack of profitability. The products are usually not recognized in the market for the quality that they have. There's a gigantic competition for market access, especially from industrial fisheries. And from imported products, but there's also competition with aquaculture because they catch the same type of small-scale fishes in many places catch the same species, sea bream, sea basses that aquaculture is producing, and recreational fisheries in many locations, especially in the south of Europe. I'm sure Malta is a case. Portugal, I come from, is staggering. The amount of recreational fisheries that actually sold in restaurants illegally because it's not permitted. So, and that's direct competition with small-scale fisheries. And there's also kind of a limited capacity to get a good price for a variety of reasons. The power is in the hands of the middlemen. There's a problem of lack of organizations and capacity in many countries, in many locations, to actually improve marketing by small-scale fisheries organizations themselves. There's also the regulation, national and sometimes national and regional regulation does not allow. For instance, I'm from Portugal. It's illegal to sell directly to the consumer. We cannot do it, and the Portuguese government says it's EU law, which it is not EU law. So, so it's not possible. It needs to go to auction, and then at auction, the few initiatives that sell directly to the consumer, fish baskets, they are buyers at auction. So they had to register as buyers, which is a different financial category with all these problems, but they are buyers at auction. So the fishermen sell at auction, and the fishing association that they belong to is trying to buy their products at auction, competing with other buyers at auction for the products, which is a complete mess. And then we have issues of global markets and free trade that also kind of make a lot of other products from other parts of the world reach the EU market at much lower prices than a small-scale fishes European fishermen can put in the market. There's other issues at the other extreme side of the value chain. The market is very well established just for a few species, so it's kind of difficult sometimes to put new species in the market. People want to eat salmon, and in some other countries, salmon being the one. If I look at Portugal, people want to eat salmon, cod. Both of them come from Norway. They want to eat sardines and octopus, and everything else is a bit. That is, but it's not so much. So, and tuna, I'm sorry, yes, tuna, the big one that everyone wants to eat all over the world. So the market is very dominated by a few species. There's huge problems of traceability, and the EU is very interested in issues around traceability. And also, there's not many initiatives out there to add value to small-scale fisheries. We looked as well, we've done a study, part of a European project, to look at what the consumers want. And we asked 3,500 people. And I broke it down there. Of course, people with it, this is all together. If I would show by country, it would be a bit of a different picture. But people do consume a lot of fish. less of the other, because we wanted to see seafood categories, different seafood categories, what did they eat at home when they're on holidays. So it's a very interesting study that I can show more, I can talk about in detail if anyone wants at the coffee break. The thing I wanted to show about this study is this: what kind of relevant information do people want to see when they buy seafood? And things that the small-scale fish industry can target is that people are very interested in the origin of seafood, if it's environmentally sustainable, and the social responsibility, this kind of fair trade. These are things that the industry can target when they're creating products to put in the market. We also did very quickly, I also did this gigantic retailer survey that we did just now in February and March, that we contacted the retailers all over the world, and most of them that replied are actually from Europe. We're very interested in this. How do they procure from small-scale fishes? We need to have a lot into consideration. That idea that we had in the past of the fishmonger in Europe has disappeared a long time ago. The big retailers dominate the seafood market. They are the biggest fishmongers all over Europe. And it's not just in the UK. I lived in Scotland for many years. Don't even think you can find a fishmonger. They don't exist. It's big retailers. But even in a context like Portugal, a country that eats so much seafood, big retailers dominate the market. We think we have fishmongers because it's present there, but the big retailers are the ones that sell the bulk of the catch, right? So we wanted to know, how do they procure small-scale fishes? Because it's not clear when you're in the supermarket what is from small-scale fishes. You can never identify it. So we wanted to know that. So how much do they procure from small-scale fish? What are the challenges that they think exist, and how could they actually procure more? So because they all have in their websites these things that they comply with the SDGs, they support the SDGs. So, well, SDG 14B says market access to small-scale fishes. So what are you doing about it? So we wanted to do this before the UN conference in Lisbon. So we did this big thing, and I'm very quickly going through it. So you can see very clearly that most of them identify that there are challenges sourcing from small-scale fisheries. Although they say they do, there are challenges. They identify a bunch of challenges, like they can't access to small-scale fishermen so easily, quantity being a gigantic issue for them, and consistency. So logistics, that they find it's difficult to get the logistics right. So there's a few why. This report is almost coming out, and I can discuss over the break. I'm very aware of my time. But one of the interesting things that we saw as well, and this had to do a bit with, there's a bunch of labels being produced for small-scale fish, a bunch of attempts at producing labels for small-scale fish. So we wanted to know if they would be interested in supporting a certification standard specially aimed at small-scale fisheries, and they are. Most of these large retailers, they basically are completely focused on the MSC certification, because that's what consumers want, environmental sustainability, and they just safeguarding they by using MSC certification, they kind of, it's safe for them. So they say they don't want to know what's behind it. It's just, well, I'm doing it, so this is me. So but they're not very happy. No one likes to be dominated by one brand, and retailers don't like to depend solely on MSC certification. So they would be very open to, we were talking to people from Marks and Spencer here and there, they are very open for other certifications to appear. And there are a lot out there. Maybe they're not looking, but there are a lot out there. I'm very aware of my time. Any questions? I'm sorry I spoke so fast. Any questions you have, please get back in touch with me. You have my email there. Even the people online, drop me an email, and I'll be very happy to discuss small-scale fisheries markets with anyone. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we have questions. Or do you want to do it at the end?
Can maybe be better to do that at the end, because I think we are going to have many things that are mixed between the different presentations. So please write down the question. Perhaps some of them might be answered in the other presentation or commented in the other presentation. Very interesting, Christina. Now we are in the next presentation. But I will send some of the experience we are developing in practice, practical experience we are trying to develop in the Canary Islands with sorry. Okay, some of the experience we are developing somehow practically with small-scale fisheries and fish organizations in the Canary Islands. The history of a long tradition of processing from very long ago. Fish has been dried, has been salted by small-scale fisheries since the Spanish conquest in the 15th century. Larger boats from the Canary Islands have been fishing in the African coast, also from the same age, and even before from the mainland. They have been salted and dried the fish. Later in the 19th, 20th century, further processing in factories like this one was developed to extend the lifespan of the salted and dried fish and prepare for export, because some of this fish was exported for a long time. In the same arena, tuna catches has been developed in the Canary Islands and exported since the 1820s. First, they were salted. Later, were exported in cans or in different preparation, and most for export to Europe. This was mostly a small-scale fisheries catches only. The boats who went to the African coast were medium-sized boats. It's difficult to say that were industrial in the 15th century, but they were medium-sized boats. But the boats that fished most of the tuna in the Canary Islands since that age were small scale, rather small boats. So it's something to take into account. But what happened in the 70s? This activity of processing in the Canary Islands was flattening out and was substituted because freezing technologies and the possibility to process the catches in different places, in other places distant to the Canary Islands, drive to the export of the catches, and most of the processing activity was wiped out from the Canary Islands. Only a few processing facilities were left in the Canary Islands, and these processing facilities were working only or mostly with fish from the industrial fisheries from everywhere in the world, just to supply some areas of the Canarian market. Specifically, for instance, all the market related with hotels, or most of the market related with restaurants and supermarkets and so on. But no presence in these processing rooms from small-scale fisheries at all. So this created a specific scenario. The fisheries in the Canary Islands are mostly small scale. We have some medium-sized boat for tuna, some long liners, medium-sized also, or a bit more than medium-sized, but mostly of the fleet, the vast majority of the fleet are small scale. And the marketing of this small scale fleet has been focused on fresh consumption of raw fresh fish, except for tuna. This fleet, this small scale fleet, most of it work also with tuna catches that are usually sent immediately or as soon as they can to the mainland. They are sent sometimes fresh by plane, and sometimes frozen with the low value fish. But most a lot of tons are sent by plane to the mainland. And then we can look to some data about the fresh fish consumption in the Canary Islands. What is happening? We have one of the lowest fresh fish consumption in Spain. Our line of consumption is the yellow one. Is around 5 kilos per year. The Canary Islands, we are surrounded by sea, but we mostly consume frozen fish. So makes sense. Makes sense that small-scale fisheries only market fresh fish when the consumption is moving toward frozen fish. It's a good question to think about. And this consumption has definitely shifted toward frozen, and the presence of small-scale fisheries in the market of frozen fish in the Canary Islands is zero. zero. For some species, it might be a good. You might have a good reason because of that, because the catches are very low, because it's very easy to market immediately, and so on. But for other catches, it makes no sense at all. Especially when we are talking about tuna. We'll see later. And at the same time, all the traditional techniques for preserving the fish, like drying or salting, etc., was put into an end because all these homemade techniques were banned due to sanitary requirements, and no industry took the role to put in these traditional techniques of preparing the fish. For maintaining this tradition of consuming fish dried or salted. Well, salted, there are some industries, but dried very, very little. In 2014, we put forward an idea to research about the opportunities in local markets for processed local. And we used different projects to finance this idea, and the results were very clear. In short, yes, there are good opportunities for the marketing of small scale catches in different innovative ways in this. And this is a good example. This is the tuna market in the Canary Islands. I have shown this before to some of you, but in the left side, you can find the catches. A bit difficult to read. In the left hand, there are the catches between 7,000 and 12,000 tons a year. In the right side, there are the exports. We export several thousand tons of tuna every year. In the middle, there are the imports. We import more than 2,000 tons a year in the last year, and the line are the consumption of tuna in the Canary Islands. Summary: more than half of the consumption of tuna, that is mostly frozen tuna, in the Canary Islands is imported. More than half from the Indic Ocean, from the Pacific, and so on. Just because in the Canary Islands there is no facilities, there are no processing rooms that transform the tuna into loins or other cuts that the market is demanding. So this opens some possibilities, of course, for innovation in this. Summary: fish processing might be competitive and need to be processed in loins, other cuts, and so on. And for that reason, we try to develop two initiatives. First of all, to arrange a pilot with the schools, providing tuna loins and other local seafood. And also, we analyzed a very interesting experience of a processing room in Lanzarote that began in the last 10 years to process local fish and to provide the market with the cuts with the cuts that were demanded. Well, school canteens, we began an experience in 2018 with 12 schools and a producing organization called Isla Tuna that has been working with tuna catches for more than 15 years now. And they were interested, both of them, to get a supply from local products, and also to Isla Tuna was interested to try to enter into this market. Previously, all the schools in the Canary Islands consumed fish for anywhere in the world, but from the Canary Islands. No consumption at all from the fish of the Canary Islands. So we try to substitute the imports in this market with tuna and other species. We need to highlight that the school canteens in the Canary Islands almost half have direct management, and they can decide where they buy the fish from. And then several trials were developed, and we began only with fresh fish, and then we make experiences with deep frozen fish, deep frozen loins, and it worked very well because it facilitates a lot the distribution, and also for the schools to have an storage that they can use. Deep freezing was not usual at all in the Canary Islands. It's not usual currently. Only a few facilities have this technique of fast freezing. And the species that we were supplied in this system were mainly tuna, skipjack, bag-eye tuna, wahoo, and others that replace mainly imports from the northern seas or even from New Zealand. We have some imports from New Zealand being marketed in this. Inver Pescatron was also a very interesting experience. This is a enterprise that was founded by a small-scale fisher that had difficulties in selling its fish, and in 2008 began with his wife to selling to restaurant, buying a second-hand refrigerated bin, and later began to sell to market the catches of other fishers, install a refrigerated room in his home, and then build a facility in 2012 with funding from the European Union, with FLAG funding, is something to highlight, and began to process the fish on demand, and was able to sell to hotels and to restaurant processed fish. Based on the demand of the restaurants or the hotels. And in this case, for instance, working with the hotels, he did an interesting strategy. He wanted to be the only supplier of the hotels about seafood, and that means mixing local seafood with imported seafood, because the hotels demand this kind of supply. They need imported seafood, but also they would like to have local seafood. What happens in other islands? There is nothing doing this role of making a unique supplier of all the demands of the hotels. So the hotels don't buy anything of local fish. Here, the local fish can enter into the hotels, and they have 15 people working in the enterprise, and they process more than 1,000 tons a year. Looking forward, I think our vision is to add processing facilities in each island to add value to the catches, to cope with the new consumer demands and big market opportunities in different fields, to process adapted to the demand, because the demand is changing continuously, and you need to have the capacity to cope with the changing demand. And we share this analysis with many actors in trying to convince some of them to take these opportunities. Also, we have some labeling in the Canary Islands, pesca artesanal, small-scale fisheries, that has been developed to increase the visibility of local catches. We participate in the development of this label, and also in this sense, local labels might help to differentiate the local product for imports and furtive catches. There are a number of local actors joining this transformation. Isla Tuna producer organization is in Tenerife, that has been involved in the pilot with the school from the beginning. Also, Pesca Restinga also involved in the pilot with the school. Tuna Export and Enterprise, cofradías like the one in Santa Cruz de La Palma, and most of them try to put to good use on flag funding. So it's possible to do interesting things with the flag funding, and the facilities that were built by Inver Pescatron were built with a strong help from flag funding at the moment. Deep freezing in this context is a key factor, because we have sometimes difficulties for selling the fish when the catches are very large, and then other moments of the year there are no catches. So using some techniques to make the market more stable might be useful from the small-scale fisheries sector, controlled by the small-scale fisheries sector. And these are some of the design of processing rooms for instance, this one is in La Palma. It's not a large facilities, but it's should be enough to process a good amount of fish and to create new market opportunities. In summary, this market, as Cristina showed you previously, have changed a lot in the last years, and the small-scale fisheries need to cope somehow with the changes. And processing and differentiating their products in the market with local labels and other strategies might be an interesting option. One of the challenges, of course, is again collective action. It's not easy to do this individually. Usually, you need to build organization. You need to work with cooperatives. You need to work with producer organization to achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
I just apologise. The airline approved our flights.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, now we have some of the presenters online. Perhaps Raquel, perhaps you would like to continue with the presentation and share your screen.
Yes, thank you. I can do that. Now you can see my screen, yeah?
Okay, works.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this example of fishing cooperative, the Sociedad Cooperativa del Mar Pesca Restinga. Is one of the oldest fishing cooperatives in the Canary Island. It's placed in El Hierro Island, which is the smallest island of this archipelago in the Canary Island. Well, the foundation of the Pesca Restinga cooperative was during the 90s, and it was motivated by a conflict between local fishers and a powerful middlemen. These kind of middlemen were very present and were very common in all Canary Islands at the beginning of the 90s. And they usually controlled the entire seafood production chain, controlling from the boats to the final distribution. So during the 90s, there was a very big conflict in between local fishers from La Restinga and this middleman. So fishers opposed to continuous working with him, and thanks to the support of the local or insular government of the island called Cabildo, they create their own cooperative. Also, this cooperative born during a period in which the Cabildo government, the insular government, was also supporting the creation of other cooperatives supporting the primary sector of the island. This is a very small island with less than 10,000 inhabitants. So many economic initiatives need the support, need some kind of institutional support. Also, this reveals the political component of this kind of initiatives many times. So the implementation of the cooperative was based on a collaboration between the small-scale fishers, organized through the cofradia, and the island government, who support technically but also economically the birth of the cooperative. From that moment, Pesca Restinga has provided very, very important stability, which is the most important. The stability for the sales and marketing of seafood in the community, particularly, and the role of the cooperative has been particularly relevant in the case of tuna species like spiked tuna, Katsumi pelamis, and yellowfin tuna, for example. In fact, the initiative of the creation of this cooperative is really linked with the pelagic fisheries. During the 19th, a new working system was established in the island, and fishers were organized themselves into a collectivity, a fish collectivity pattern or formula. They share in boats, gears, and crew through Pesca Restinga in a complex sharing system. Today, fishers don't continue working at that way, but it was very important from the beginning. So the creation of the cooperative was supported in the collaboration with the island government, but also was support, and it was very important, the fishing collective action and support of the fishing organizations as the cofradia. Today, the cooperatives still manage the marketing of the catches, but they don't organize the work activity in the sea, as I was mentioning. However, some fishers from the smaller boats, sometimes they may join the crew of larger boats during the tuna season, especially where family ties succeeds. So the cooperative is also working and playing an important role introducing young fishers in the activity and helping to maintain the fishing local ecological knowledge related with some key fisheries, as the tuna fisheries. Well, this is an example. This is an example of big boats that they are commonly used for the tuna fisheries in La Restinga, in El Hierro Island. Restinga is the only fishing community of the island. And these are other examples of smaller boats that we can find. In the Canary Islands, fishers usually combine different fisheries. Of course, tuna fisheries, pelagic fisheries are very important, but during the rest of the year, they can also combine the tuna fisheries with other kind of fisheries, demersal fisheries like parrot fisheries, or other kind of demersal. And this is this imagine is an example. I don't know if you see my how do you say? ¿Cómo se dice el ratón, José?
Mouse.
Yeah, the mouse, sorry. I don't know if you see the mouse, but this is an example about how they usually work in the 19th. Here you have 4 big boats, and after you can see that how fishers that own very small boats organize themselves through family ties to go working to the biggest one during the tuna period. So Pesca Restinga during the tuna period constitute a fishing production unit. And what was that? So the Pesca Restinga itself works as one fishing productive unit, integrating the group of people, and all economic activities of fishing, and they share boats, gears, technology, infrastructures, and of course accumulate the knowledge that I was mentioning before, the know-how and the skills over the generation among these fishers that they were fishing together for the tuna period almost. So in the story of this cooperative, we can talk about 3 different stages. This first period during the 19th, when the cooperative was created, was implemented, and when fishers work usually together, especially during the tuna period. After with the new millennium, after the 2000, there were different. There was a division among fishers because these different strategies combining tuna fisheries with other demersal fisheries, and because of also the existence of other marketing channels, not only the cooperative. Different fishers, for example, provide a fresh demersal fish for the local restaurants. So different divisions among them prompt the division of the cooperative, and some of these fishers that get out of the cooperative start to work also with the original middlemen that returned to the island. But what happened? In 2011, we suffered a submarine volcano eruption that affects especially very heavily, very deep to this community, and the fleet was the fishing activities were stopped almost for 1 year. So after when the fishing activities reached after the submarine volcano in 2012, after 1 year, only pelagic fisheries were allowed, and the cooperative changed its business model with new agreements with other cooperatives. The cooperative Pesca Restinga signed a multi-year agreement with the fishing producer organization in Tenerife, Isla Tuna. I don't know if Jose or Jaime will talk about this other cooperative during this morning. And to market, so they signed this multi-year agreement to market the catches using the infrastructures of Isla Tuna in return for a percentage of the final sale. This change, even in that context, after a submarine volcano and after 1 year without fishing activities, improved the tuna marketing and made it possible to increase catches of some tuna species that they are very common in the waters of El Hierro, but were not previously fished very intensively. For example, here you can see what happened in 2011 and 2012. Here we have a zero situation, completely closure of the fishing activity. For this reason, we have no data landings from this year. But after, when the fishing activities recover, as you can see, well, they fish more. But the increase is related, excuse me, with the yellowfin tuna and the skipjack tuna landings increase, as you can see. This year, this is not a decline. This year, that what happened is that the data landings of these two registered in Isla Tuna. So the activity, the tuna landings, the tuna activities continues, only that in these data we have not the data landing recorded because it's in the Isla Tuna data landing recorded. I'm sorry. Also, apart from this agreement, the cooperative also expand their agreements with local agents and institutions to gain presence in the local municipal markets as well as local supermarkets or grocery stores in the entire island. And of course, school canteens, as Jose mentioned before. We have the Canadian government has been supporting different projects improving the consumption of local products in schools, canteens during the last year. And of course, the cooperatives is also involved in the canteen schools of the island. And also they have started to improve the commercialization, as Jose mentioned it before. Some experimental and new products are emerging, and one of these new products is the smoked wahoo. That this is something really new that during this summer they start to produce. So the cooperative is also innovation in new products, not only selling the frozen tuna. So despite the high mortality rates of fish in 2011, the various measures adopted during 2012 and 2013 facilitate the recovery of the small fishing activity in La Restinga, despite the submarine volcano eruption. Total landings and the revenues exceed the values usually recorded before the eruption, thanks, of course, the tuna fish marketing, thanks to improve the tuna fish marketing through the cooperative Pesca Restinga, and also the increase of the agreements with all other cooperatives in the archipelago. And there is something that to me was also very important to show you, is because during the last years, we have been working in different fishing scenarios after the fishing recovery activity through the COPAT with ecosystem modeling framework. I don't know if Pablo is in the room today. So temporal simulations from the next decades were analyzed by creating scenarios of alternative fishing effort distribution based on the fishing trends observed in the small-scale community after the natural hazard. And the outcomes of this model prototype the resilience of these migratory species and the sustainability of the small-scale fisheries, this diversification strategy. So I think that it's very important to finish this brief presentation, highlight the role of the cooperatives increasing the fishing resilience, supporting this tuna marketing. There is a common sentence that we always say that if after the volcanic eruptions, fishers, or if in the context of the volcano eruption, fishers were so specialized in demersal species only, or if they were not involved in the cooperative, the scenario today would be very, very, very different. So thank you. And here there are some reference about the studies that we have been performing during this year about the recovery and the importance of pelagic fisheries and the role played by the COFRADI in the context of the volcano eruption in El Hierro. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. Now I think we can continue with the last online presentation by Jaime Ramón. David Florido is not presenting today, so we have left the presentation from Jaime Ramón and Hazel Parrubia, and then we will have I hope some minutes for the comments. So Jaime, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning. I'm Jaime Ramón Bruquetas, researcher of Universidad de La Laguna. I'm going to highlight some impacts of the transposition of the community control system regulation in the markets and value chains in small-scale fisheries in Tenerife. Addressing a research question that arose during the development of an ethnography about artisanal fishers in the island, focused on collective action and marketing strategies. As you can see below the red arrow, Tenerife is one of the main islands of the Canary Islands, an archipelago in the Atlantic Ocean. It's an ultra-peripheral region of Spain, pretty distant from Spain mainland and in front of Africa, and thus with its own peculiarities. The problem to address is that small-scale fisheries are managed with regulations conceived for large-scale operations, resulting sometimes in regulatory mismatches. We are going to see the specific case of the community control system and its uneven application in Europe, how this regulation has been transposed to the national legislation, what the marketing situation in Tenerife is, the consequences of the transposition of this regulation in the island, and finally a few insights on the impacts on collective action. Okay, regarding to the problem to address, the regulatory mismatches, we have to first say that it's frequent to hear fishermen complaining about a legislation that it's not appropriate to regulate the activity and that it's defined by civil servants in Brussels, Madrid, or Gran Canaria that do not have the proper knowledge of the particularities of the territory and that may respond to pressures that have little or nothing to do with the health of the ecosystems, the optimal supply of food, and the well-being of the artisanal fisher. What is a fact is that the regulations binding to artisanal fishers in Tenerife, apart from the international treaties, the European Union legislation is very relevant as it's directly binding to Spain, especially the fisheries common policy and the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. Apart from that, maritime fishers in Spain are regulated by the state, while regulation in internal waters, these areas in blue, and fisheries development are managed by regional governments. So with the difference of 1 meter, one or other legislation has to be applied. Moreover, municipalities and regional government have competences over certain subjects such as ambulant sales, complicating even more this jurisdictional framework. Okay, this complex jurisdictional framework with multiple agents involved and with an entangled bureaucratic fabric, complicate even more the activity. Now, fishers are increasingly dependent on external advisors and civil servants, and governmental leaders are limited in their decision-making despite their goodwill. So this complicated legal framework can lead to regulatory mismatches. And these mismatches don't happen only on fisheries regulation. They do happen as well in fish selling. In the Canary Islands, women of the fishing families have traditionally controlled the fish selling, and they have been selling directly to final consumers and more recently to restaurants. These days, not in all communities, women maintain this role, and we will see how the transposition of this regulation goes against this traditional selling pattern that has been developed in the island already. We have a good example of these regulatory mismatches in the community control system of the European Union for ensuring compliance with the rules of the common fisheries policies. In Article 59 states, point 2, that the buyer of fisheries products from a fishing vessel at first sale shall be registered with the competent authorities. But in point 3, we can read that a buyer acquiring fisheries products up to an amount of 30 kilos, which are not thereafter placed on the market but used only for private consumption, shall be exempted from this article. This regulation has been unevenly transposed in Europe. France, for example, allows the fishers to sell directly their products to final consumers, even from their boats. In Italy, more or less, the situation is the same. Even the European Union has edited a handbook on how to sell directly. But what happens in Spain? Okay, in Spain, this regulation has been transposed to the national legislation by Real Decreto 418/2015, which states that in specific cases, the regional government, in this case would be the Canary Islands government, can regulate the acquisition of small quantities of fishery products by final consumers. But the situation in Spain is very different depending on the territory. In the peninsula, in Spain mainland, the auction system works. Fishers land their catches in the auction that is usually controlled by cofradías or guilds, which are the ones in charge of the commercialization. So direct sales hasn't been an issue to be addressed by the national government, and only a couple of particular authorizations have been given in Catalonia for direct sales. But what happens in the Canary Islands? Okay, the Canary Islands, the situation is different. First of all, we have to say that it's no auction system implemented, but first sale points. In these first sale points, artisanal fishers land their catches, they are weighted, a sales note is generated with the details of the transaction, and it's the fisher, him or herself, the one in charge of the commercialization of the product. The regional government, the government of the Canary Island, has not developed a law in order to allow direct sale to final consumers. So according to national law, only selling to final consumer is unlawful, because an individual cannot register in the system, only companies or freelancers or wherever. Besides, ambulance sales are forbidden in many municipalities. So in order to sell directly fisher final consumer, it's needed to register a new company in the fishing household with all the risks and expenses involved. Moreover, competitors are increasing their pressure. Supermarkets are offering imported products and products from other islands at very competitive prices, and at the same time, poachers are offering products of the same quality, cheaper as well. Moreover, there are fewer potential customers. First of all, the number of fishmongers and their activity has fallen. We can see a map here of the fishmongers that were working in 2014, and we can see that El Cardoncillo, El Coral, these ones in the north have already disappeared. So somebody willing to buy fresh fish has to travel to the few remaining fish shops in the big urban areas. Resellers as well, the number of resellers and intermediaries has fallen as well, partly because they cannot meet the sanitary requirements. If we add all these facts to the ban on selling to final consumers, we can see that restaurants are in a very special position now. They are the main customer of these fishers, so their negotiation power is enormous. This negotiation power has led to a price stagnation and a need of higher catches to reach the same profitability. So if this price stagnation we add the rise of activity prices, the increased pressure of competitors, and the fewer potential customers, we can see that the perception of non-profitability of the activity can lead to abandonment and poaching. So an individual willing to buy local sustainable fish products has either to travel to one of these few fish shops remaining in the big urban areas, paying a higher price, or to buy it in their community, as they have already done, for a lower price, but now buying it to professional fishermen, now illegally, or to poachers, in both cases promoting black market. Okay, what are the consequences of the transposition of these regulations to artisanal fishers in Tenerife? First of all, although the European regulation aims to promote artisanal fisheries, we have seen that sometimes it leads to abandonment. This regulation aims as well to improve the control of stocks, but as some of these catches are being sold and reported, no control is undertaken, no taxes are paid for these products. It affects negatively subsidies, as some of these are granted depending on the amount of catches, and no traceability is possible. Moreover, even though the European Union encourages direct selling, and it's contemplated in the community control system, the government of the Canary Islands has not developed any legislative measure to address it. So now, direct selling in Tenerife, it's forbidden. Furthermore, access to local fish products, it's not being facilitated as it's getting even more complicated. And black market and poaching is not being tackled but boosted. And all this is happening in a context where the regulation goes against the traditional patterns that have been developed in the island traditionally. But what if these hindrances transform into an opportunity to boost collective action? If this ban on direct selling could encourage local fishermen to gather and to develop collective commercial strategies to sell their products, many of these negative consequences could be reverted. Control of stocks could be improved, black market and poaching could be reduced, access to local fish products would be facilitated, and fishers organizations would be reinforced, resulting in a clear benefit for all the sector. But how this could be achieved? We have to take into account that there are certain important limitations for collective action in the territory. First of all, apart from the individualism inherent to this kind of groups, local fishers in these communities have been traditionally selling their own catches individually, and it has been working pretty well, easily, and depending only on themselves, and controlling their own commercial and productive strategies. Secondly, the negative external socioeconomic context has led to a conflicted climate within this group, which has created a negative atmosphere that does not help the collective action whatsoever. And finally, although these are small groups and relatively homogeneous, the concept of union is not widely spread, and the interest in common collaboration is not their general rule. So the challenge here is to find out how all these limitations could be tackled. And that's it. Thanks a lot. If you have any comments, questions.
Thank you very much, Jaime. I think we will leave the comments for after the last presentation. And in this case, the last presentation is from someone in the room, Hazel Farouk here, who will develop the last presentation.
Okay, so hello, good afternoon. My name is Hazel Farouja. I'm a program manager within the Fisheries Research Unit at the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture here in Malta. And today I'm going to speak to you about Blue Phasma, fostering a blue circular economy in the fisheries sector. So starting off with a little bit of introduction about the project. This was a 2.8 million project. It was co-funded by the ERDF, the European Regional Development Fund, and through the Interreg Med program 2014-2020. It was launched in November of 2019 and ended this June. The partnership was composed of 14 organizations, institutes from 9 different countries, including Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Croatia, Montenegro, Greece, Cyprus, and of course, Malta. So why was there the need for this project? Blue Phasma is about rethinking circularity, moving away from the linear economic model, which is wasteful and very pollutant on the environment, to a more innovative circular economy, which is less wasteful, does not degrade the environment, and is more eco-friendly. It aspires to trigger change in the fisheries and aquaculture sector of the Mediterranean coastal and insular areas by reinforcing circular economic practices. It also tackles the challenge of the low Mediterranean innovation performance in circular economy in this sector by empowering innovation capacities in SMEs, in Mediterranean maritime clusters, and also in public authorities in order to boost again and trigger circular economy. So if circular economy is more beneficial, why haven't we moved on to circular economy earlier? So currently there are some barriers to circular economy, including cultural and social barriers. However, we know that local communities could play an important role in supporting sustainable fisheries. There's also institutional and governance barriers, such as limited circular procurement. There are also economic and market barriers, which include limited availability of raw materials, lack of resources to support high and new investment, lower prices and subsidies of raw materials, and not enough incentives for secondary raw materials. Also, there are technological and environmental barriers, such as the life cycle assessment of the product. To this end, the team project has produced 5 Blue Phasma tools to address these challenges. The first of is the Circular Economy Knowledge Database, and this systemizes the best practices, tools, and solutions and methods in the sector of fisheries. There's also the Blue Phasma Circularity Self-Assessment Tool. This acts as a decision supporting tool, and it's unified metering measures of the SME's readiness and willingness to invest in circular economy. There's also the Blue Phasma e-network, which facilitates exchange and networking amongst all actors in the fisheries sector, and the Blue Phasma capacity building instrument, which again integrates the financing, mentoring, coaching for R&I business investment in this sector. Lastly, there's also the Med Circular Economy data, and this provides data related to business readiness and willingness to invest in circular economy, again in the Mediterranean area. In addition, apart from these tools, FASMA also created two main policy outputs, the white paper as well as 12 key policy recommendations, which we are going to delve into very shortly. So starting off with the white paper, this acts to support the transition towards circular economy in the fisheries sector. It identifies the existing barriers and proposes solutions to boost circular transition in this sector. It also explores the relationship between the principles of circular economy, blue economy, and sustainable fisheries. Some of the key challenges addressed are the lack of harmonization and presence of legislative barriers that inhibit the transition to innovative systems, the limited attention to efficient resources and elimination of waste, both upstream and during the intermediate stages of the product life cycle, the weak communication and the dissemination of best practices and technologies between all actors in this field, and the need for the development for financial and economic instruments and tools. Moving on to the policy recommendations. So as I said, 12 key issues were identified. We are just going to talk about them very briefly. The first one is funding. This is important in order to ensure realistic and adequate funds in order to transition to a circular economy. The second one is governance. This is about the control and compliance of operations to be in line with the governance criteria. The third one is review and harmonization of legislation. This calls for the review and updating of legislation in order to enable circular economy to be in place. The fourth one is sea waste collection. This is, for example, the collection of sea waste by fishing boats, and in order to ensure that the financial and logistical measures in order for this operation to take place are actually existent. The fifth one is the innovation to turn waste into profit. This is a means by which to transform waste into profit by developing new projects and in order to ensure that environmental compensation mechanisms for this activity. The sixth one is the qualification and quantification of waste in order to adopt the end of waste criteria. So, seventh key issue is the collective organization and action. This is in response to common challenges and opportunities faced by the actors in this field. The eighth one is the creation of eco-labeling and certification schemes. I believe that this point has been mentioned as well by other presenters in this Congress. This is the development and implementation of eco-labeling and certification schemes for sustainable fishing, secondary raw materials, and byproducts, so that the consumer is aware of what he or she is buying. The ninth one is technology transfer, and what it is knowledge dissemination. Again, this is the transfer of existing technology, which we are aware of, and knowledge amongst the sector and all actors and stakeholders in the field. The 11th is generational turnover, was the 12th, as again a point mentioned already by speakers before me, is the gender equality. So moving forward, whilst it is true that the FASMA project has ended, it does not mean that the Malta's commitment to a circular economy has also ended. In 2017, Malta signed the Malta Met Fish Forever Ministerial Declaration, affirming its political will on the blue economy. Whilst a year later, the Circular Economy Malta was set up, again highlighting Malta's commitment to a circular economy. During 2014-2020, our department, as well as the EU, had into operation the EMFF, the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, which is now being replaced by its successor, in the MFAF, European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, for the period 2021-2027. And again, this fund will now encourage us as stakeholders, as sectors, as partners, the harmonization and implementation of blue circular economy in the national and in the regional context. In addition to this, Malta also became a signatory to the Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, meaning that Malta will keep its promises towards these goals by shifting towards a circular economy. To conclude, again, in line with the PFASMA objectives, the DFA aims to strengthen local communities for sustainable fisheries and by promoting knowledge of circularity through a more integrated and collaborative production as well as consumption system. It will adopt a targeted communication strategy to inform researchers, policy and decision makers and consumers. It will also aid to upskill the fishing and aquaculture workforce, as well as to promote public awareness activities for both young and adult stakeholders. So that was all from my end. Thank you very much for your attention, and thanks as well to the team who carried out this work. If you would like more information on this project, feel free to visit the website and the social media, as well as of course, for people who are in person here and listening to this talk, there is a Blue PFASMA booklet, which you can feel free to take one with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the presenters. Have a few minutes for some questions or comments. Also from the online system.
Thank you first of all
Cornelia, please.
for really fascinating series presentation. I think there are a lot of good examples that we can probably build on and look for the balance between what we can generalize and what needs to be very local. I have perhaps a trivial question, but I noted that over the last year in particular, there was a huge influx of Sudanese refugees. Several, who came with the boats across, and several of which were also are any of those being able to integrate into the country, how, let's say, address the rejuvenation, etc. Because perhaps they may also not be spoiled by conditions, willing to take up because they are used to.
That's a good question, but it's not easy to answer. We don't have the data about the volume of immigrants working in small-scale fisheries in the Canary Islands. And we know that there are some of them working in medium-sized boats, not the smaller one, and mainly linked to family and to tradition. But in the medium-sized boat, there are some immigrants. Some have arrived by this means, others have arrived legally, but I think it's something to analyze in. I tried with one student last year to do something about that, but finally it was too difficult for her, but too complicated. But I think it's something that we should do definitely to know a bit more about what is happening with these immigrants from fisheries that come from Senegal or from other African coastal countries to the Canary Islands.
I'm asking because we're working with small scale fisheries, and they are desperate for young people to. And they were actually asking us to help them get some studies on. The difficulty is endless. You need diplomas, and
that's the point.
You know what to do any of those things illegal. So
That's
It's a real challenge to start up, especially next slide.
yes, that's a big challenge. Spain, you wanted to please question?
General question. Question. Obvious. Income very eager, very based. That's my speakers. I wonder. Taxes. Markets as price. Not as price makers. But it's emerging from a situation of price takers. Price
I think it's a very difficult one of the
Christina, close to here because I think, and if you can summarize the question
Yes.
very briefly, that better.
No, we couldn't listen to Spain, but I'm sorry.
then ask how can we if we have examples, how can local fishers enter markets and be price makers instead of price takers? I will go give both yes and no. The retailer survey that I did, but that was one of the interesting issues. Beyond even them being price make, we don't even know in the supermarket shelf what is from small-scale fisheries. And a retailer in France that actually does source from small-scale fisheries, most of them source from small-scale fisheries, but then they don't identify it in the shelf. And we were curious, why don't you then? And they were saying, because by pointing to the ones that are small-scale fisheries, we are indirectly pointing to what is not. And people actually want products. They want local, they want. But if you point, oh, this is from small-scale fisheries, that is, everyone is going to ask, and what about the rest? It is not. And this is one of the problems, and one of the advice we're providing is there's a need for transparency in supermarket shelves of what comes from where, because they never identify where things come from. So that's a bit of a problem. Then you do have these kind of initiatives. I didn't talk about it, but you do have these kind of smaller initiatives that connect producers to consumers, where producers are price makers. An example I can give you is fish baskets. Portugal has it's a fish box scheme, but we call it fish basket in Portugal. It comes from the agriculture basket. There they are price makers. They decided how much the basket should cost. And then they get these consumers that are willing to pay for that basket and eat whatever is in the basket. So not just the products that they want. And they are making the price. So they are, in that case, they're price makers. But these are really niche type of consumers, someone that's willing to pay a bit more, someone that has affordable cash. And let's now see with the economic crisis that's coming, how many of these schemes will actually prevail after the middle class actually gets a slap in terms of cost of living. I'm not so sure. It will be very interesting to look at all of this again in 2 or 3 years' time and see how many consumers continue buying a fish basket, but they really are paying a bit of a premium over the price they will get in the market. And they are getting species that in the market would cost almost nothing, and sometimes don't even get to the market because there is no market for them. So they are included in the basket. It costs 40 euros and 45 euros for 3 kilos of fish, which for the Portuguese is really a high price, right? Because we buy very cheap fish and we like it like that, which is a bit of a duality. So you can be a price maker in some schemes. But will it actually continue working?
I wonder if that is
We have to say, you have to do something. The question is, how you do it. But it's not necessarily.
Totally agree with you. And I would go a bit beyond small scale fisheries here. Fishermen are price takers. As long as they have to sell an auction, and the auction is a Dutch auction, it goes down, they are not price makers. They're price takers. The middleman makes the price. Engine.
Yes. In some cases, the fishers might try to control some segments of the market, but that needs several things. That needs a very clear differentiation of the product. The product should be clearly differentiated from the other products imported or whatever. And it needs some kind of collective action so to make an agreement about how to sell them, how to sell this product. And usually these are barriers for transforming the place takers into place makers. It has been done sometimes, but it's not easy. Where the state has not had a strong role, as you commented for the case of Norway, to place that capacity to intervene into the market in the hands of the people.
For sure, in this example where they had cold storage and food was one way to buy.
Oh yes, I can tell. It's very clear. Skipjack tuna is sold by the fishers to the large companies and €1 something. The skipjack loins are sold very easily to the schools at €5, and it could be sold in supermarkets even more expensive. No problem. But they need to put the product in that channels to be able to increase the income, and it's possible. But we just need to work collectively.
Have you observed any rules, for example, we had in the previous days, that an absolutely staggering amount of goes to waste? For example, if you only take loins and the rest is not as much. I've seen a report. There was now a company, I can't remember where, trying to what differences.
Yes, it's possible. It's possible. We in this project we are working with chefs and we are working with different actors to try to reduce the waste and try to use that waste for different byproducts. And it's possible to use most of that waste into and transform into possible. Of course.
That is the only thing. Then what have to be allowed by the government. So the price in the morning, the shelter. But you're still a maker. And that's only why free sell it to the customer. I don't think.
Well, in the Canary Islands, it's possible to sell it. We don't have auctions. We don't have Dutch auction. It's possible to sell directly to the customers, but the customers need to be registered by business. So you need to sell to restaurants, you need to sell to companies, not to the public. For selling to the public, as Jaime commented, you need to build a new company just focus on selling. That's not easy for both. But it's of course it's possible to sell directly this in the Canary Islands. But the product needs to be clearly differentiated. Well, it's late. You are free to leave. There is a last question.
We do have to stop Zoom.
Okay, we stop the Zoom. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Jaime, Raquel, for contributing to the session at the distance. Bye. See you. Thank you.
Bye.